Hi, I'm Jeremy Caplan. I'm excited to talk with you about the 3 top tools for teachers in 2026. I teach at the CUNY Newmark Graduate School of Journalism. I've been a journalist for a couple of decades now, writing for Time Magazine and now independently. And I now focus on helping journalists move forward in the new generation of journalism at the City University of New York. And I write the Wonder Tools newsletter, focusing on tools and how they can be useful for you. I'd like to focus on 3 tools today. The first is NotebookLM. NotebookLM is basically a tool for adding AI to any material you have. You start by creating a notebook, and you can add sources to that notebook. You can add documents, you can add spreadsheets, slides, PDFs, even videos, links to YouTube videos, uploaded audio files, links to websites. Then you can explore those sources. So there's a wide range of materials you can add. You can add up to 50 sources in each notebook, each of which can be 200 megabytes in size. These are large files, and you can have 100 different notebooks on different topics, and that's all in the free plan of NotebookLM, which is Google's Gemini-powered AI notebook service that teachers can use to organize teaching materials, specific kinds of lesson plans. And you can explore the materials once you've created a notebook for a particular class you teach, for example. You can explore those materials. You can find material that's appropriate for a certain subject or on a certain topic, or that references certain kinds of lessons that you're teaching. You can identify connections between different materials, for example, between a lesson plan you have and a standard that you're teaching towards. You can search for ideas for a new lesson plan in your own notes and materials. And then within NotebookLM, you can also use the studio to create slide decks and infographics or quizzes and flashcards for your students. You can also have your students create their own notebooks, making their own learning materials to dive deeper into the subject matter that you're teaching. You can generate mind maps, reports, video and audio materials, and I'll show you all of that in a moment. That is NotebookLM in a nutshell, and I'll dive in with an example momentarily. I also want to introduce you to Figjam, which is a terrific whiteboard tool for creative, interactive lessons in class, online or in person, for any level that you're teaching. You can do this kind of creative whiteboarding for brainstorming purposes, to get people to reflect and synthesize something you've been teaching, or for guided exploration as you walk people through the material in your lesson plan. Figjam is colorful, it's easy to use, and as an educator, you can use it completely for free. The third tool I'll share with you is Genially. Genially is a wonderful tool to add interactivity to any interactivity to any material that you're teaching. You can use this for quizzes and surveys. You can use it for presentations you're presenting to students. You can create games with it. You can even create infographics and various kinds of handouts that have hotspots on them. So students can click on a particular part of your image or handout and see a map, or see a video, or an audio file, or they can jump off to a link. And previously that would require programming or a complex understanding of interactive development, but now you literally just click on something in your design, in a PDF you've added, or a document you've added, or a design you've created from scratch, and you say, I want this to link to a YouTube video, or I want this to link to a map, or I want this to link to a Google Doc, and add interactivity to any of your teaching materials, making lessons, whether they're in person or remote, more engaging, more fun, more inspiring, and more playful. These can be used for assessments like these little quizzes here. They can be used for games that you create where you have people at any level. This is maybe a kid's version, but this could be for any level. Looking at anatomy, looking at science, astronomy. You can embed videos, like in this example. You can embed maps, as in this example. They're interactive in each case, and it's really easy to use. You can use it for really any subject matter that you are teaching, whether it's in the sciences or in the humanities or in any other field. And it's quite easy to use. Once you get started, you basically learn the interface really, really easily. So these are the 3 tools I'm going to share with you. A couple of examples of how we use them in practice in real cases. So I'm first going to jump into NotebookLM. What we're looking at here is a collection of notebooks that I have. These are public notebooks in this case, some from The Economist, from Our World in Data. These are notebooks that others have created. But I want to share with you a notebook, and these are some of my own notebooks that I've created. I want to share with you one specific one. This is a notebook about NotebookLM. And the three sections are as follows. On the left, there's the source section. So I can add sources. I can upload my own files from my Google Drive or PDFs or any kind of documents, even images. For example, I often take pictures of a whiteboard in a classroom. I can add that to a notebook. I can add any of my prior handouts or notes or transcripts to this notebook. I can also use the search functionality. So in this case, because it's a notebook about NotebookLM, I could ask it to search for special documents, excellent documents, useful documents related to NotebookLM and how teachers are using it. So how teachers are using NotebookLM in creative ways in the classroom. And I'm just going to ask it for a fast research as opposed to deep research, which is my other option. I could search my own Google Drive if I have documents on the subject, or I can search, as I'm searching in this case, on the web. So it's already found me about 10 sources, and I can look at these and decide which ones I want to add. These are going to be from a variety of sources. I can also assess the sources by clicking on this to open up a new tab with that link to see where that's from. There's a YouTube video here, there's a variety of material. If I want to, I can import all those files or some of those, or I can just move on and just focus on my own particular material. So I'm going to delete those. I already have materials in this notebook that I've uploaded myself earlier. And any of these materials that I want to look at, by the way, I can see what this actually is. I can drill into this and see a summary of this material and then the original material itself and then a transcript if it's a video. So this happens to be the creator of NotebookLM talking about NotebookLM, and here's a summary of that source, and I can go back to the original source. But for now, I want to show you the next panel, which is the Exploration tab, the Chat tab. So here I have a summary of the 20 sources in this notebook, the 20 different kinds of files, and I can query this. I've already queried it in the past, but I can say, point me to examples of NotebookLM's assessment practice tools. And I can query that, and it's going to take a minute. It's going to look only at the sources I have. So this is one difference between NotebookLM and other general large language models like ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or Microsoft Copilot. Those tools might look at their own training data as well as at the web and other materials. NotebookLM, though, is grounded in your sources. So it's going to look specifically only at the sources you have, and it's going to give you citations for where in your sources the particular query response can be found. So in this case, I'm asking about assessment capabilities within NotebookLM, and it's pointing me to these various different tools, like how it can create practice quizzes for students and how it can create interactive flashcards for students. And if I want to see where that's mentioned, I can click on that, and it's going to show me in purple where in one of the sources that use of, in this case, this tool, NotebookLM, was mentioned. And it's going to highlight that in purple. So I can always make sure that the information it's finding is validated and verifiable. The third tab you have here on the far right is the Studio panel within NotebookLM. And this is where we can create all kinds of things. You can see here we can create an infographic or a slide deck. We can create a quiz or flashcards. I want to show you some examples that I've created. So here is a mind map. So this is showing me a visual picture, essentially, of what's in this notebook. And then I can click on any of these to find out more about that material in this notebook. I can also, in addition to the mind map, look at other material, like, for example, an infographic. This is an infographic that I previously generated from this notebook. In this case, I asked it to basically summarize the key capabilities of NotebookLM, and it generated this infographic for me in about 1 minute. It takes about a minute in many cases to generate something, sometimes a little bit more. I can also ask it to generate a slide deck. So this is a slide deck that it generated for me, for example, for educators who are interested in using NotebookLM for teaching journalism. So you can see here it created some interesting slides on that subject and some examples of how journalists and journalism educators might use NotebookLM for their teaching of journalism. There are other examples. Here's another example of NotebookLM's slide creation. These are a little bit more visual kind of slides describing why NotebookLM can be useful in journalism for journalists. And in addition to those, I can ask it to generate a quiz, for example, or a set of flashcards. So if I scroll up here, you'll see I've created a whole bunch of different things, including audio overviews, and here's a video overview.
All right, let's talk about a tool that might just change how you deal with information overload forever. It's called NotebookLM from Google, and it's built to be your own personal AI research assistant. We're talking about turning those mountains of documents, videos, and notes into an expert that's built just for you. Okay, to really get what this thing can do, check this out. What you're seeing here, this was generated by NotebookLM.
Okay, so this is an example of a video generated with NotebookLM. There's also audio pieces, so here's an example of that.
So what exactly is NotebookLM? Well, think of it as an AI thinking engine from Google, but one that's designed specifically for your research.
That's an example of how the audio sounds. And here's a quiz about NotebookLM. And again, this could be about any subject you're teaching about. This could be a history notebook with some specific area of history or science or any other subject. I just chose NotebookLM for the moment. And here's what a quiz might look like. And this is an example of what I was saying. This is a question that it's generated this quiz, and it's going to give me the correct answers and explanations of my incorrect answers if I've answered something incorrectly. And then finally, I can generate these flashcards as well if I'm studying something. So that's also a pretty handy way to use this. And I can customize what it creates. So I'm going to click flashcards. I'm going to click easy. And I'm going to click a fewer number of cards. Flashcards about the basics of NotebookLM for educators. And this would be a tool students could again use to basically help themselves study on a subject that you're teaching for them. You can give them the flashcards, you can share a notebook with your students, or you can have your students create their own notebooks. And these flashcards are created just like all of the other materials in the studio in real time. Typically it takes 30 seconds to a minute, depending on the complexity of your sources, the complexity of the material you are creating. And you can see here I've generated all of these prior materials in this notebook, and here are some examples of flashcards I previously created. And you click on that, you click on the flashcard to see the back, and you can get an explanation for anything that you want. It'll explain it in the chat area. So if we go back here, we'll see this flashcard set that I just created is now ready. And you can see how quickly that was done. So that, in a nutshell, is NotebookLM. I'm going to flip over now to look at our next tool, which is Figjam. Figjam is a digital whiteboard that we can use in teaching to make our classes more engaging, more interactive, more visual, and more dynamic. You can see here an example of a kind of whiteboard with lots of students moving around, adding stickers, adding images, typing on their stickies with a timer. There's a little bit of background music. This, again, can be used in person. It can be used remotely. It can be used at an elementary school level, high school level, college level. I've used it at a graduate school level and for professionals, but it can be used at really any level. It's very user-friendly, very easy to use. And you can start with templates. So you don't have to kind of create a lot of prior materials. Now it has a really helpful feature, which is that it can summarize your material. So in this case, what we're seeing on screen now is you can have the stickies that students put up or that you put up with students, and then you can ask Figjam to summarize that or put it into categories to help you synthesize afterwards or review what people have added. And it's a really fun way to visually collaborate with your students or to have your students work together in groups. I'm going to show you an example of how this works in another kind of sandbox board that I created. So here's a board I was playing around with just to experiment with different uses. This is showing how you can use Figjam with other tools to do what's called app smashing. So in this case, you can have a Google Doc that students are working in, but on Figjam they can look at images and add to them and then add their synthesis to the Google Doc. Or they can add to a Google slide deck or add stickies to this board. They can watch these YouTube videos either independently in class during work time or as an assignment prior to class or an assignment after class, and then they can add their thoughts in the sticky notes and see what other people have said. They can listen to this file from NPR, for example. They can look at a map or interact with a map. There's all kinds of different ways to use Figjam in conjunction with the other tools you're using in your class. You can create this or that exercise where they complete on a whiteboard. You can use the whiteboard for synthesizing and ideating and collaborating and brainstorming around any activity you're doing in class. And now to look at Genially. This again is another interactive tool focused on adding interactive buttons or interactive capabilities to any presentation, any game you're creating, any quiz, really any kind of material you're using for teaching. So here are examples within Genially of all sorts of games and challenges, templates that you have ready to go. And these can be all kinds of different things. For example, I was looking recently at a Jeopardy kind of game for students and thinking about how I could create a simple Jeopardy game. And this was a great way to do it. So you can basically flip to any section of this template and start editing it. So I could change these categories. I can look at this question and change this particular question just by editing the text. I don't have to recreate the whole template, the whole technology behind it. But I can basically use the existing template to make a new Jeopardy game for my students. And then I just share the link with students in class, or if it's an online class, I share it online. I can also run this in real time from the front of the class, even if students don't have a computer, by basically doing the interaction on their behalf or having 1 or 2 students volunteer to do the interaction. So there's a lot of different ways to use Genially in an in-person class or in a remote class or in a workshop of any kind. You can also use Genially not just for games and quizzes, but for timelines, like this one, for example, or for presentations like this one, where you basically have just a little bit more engaging slides that have interactive components that link off to a video or link off to an audio or to a map. There's all sorts of different kinds of templates you can use. Here's one, for example, for a live online session. And here's one with just some flashcards, basically, that you can use for any subject that you are teaching. So Genially, like NotebookLM and Figjam, is a terrific tool for interactivity. All 3 of these tools help you as the teacher keep your students engaged, inspire their curiosity, make your class a little bit more interactive, allow you to convey the material in really interesting and fun and effective ways to accomplish your learning objectives while also keeping students actively engaged instead of passively consuming the information via a boring or dry lecture. So these are among the best tools of the year from my perspective for 2026 for teachers. I'd be very curious what other tools you're finding useful and how you end up using these particular tools as well.